talk about people who are left out, there is the moderate majority, right? We know that you're progressive, you're a little bit more left than President Biden. How do you target those people who felt that they have been left behind?
Well, I'm not targeting anyone. I'm telling the truth as I understand it. That's what leadership should be. When in 2016, there were two candidates who said to the American people, your rage is legitimate, you have been left out, and the system is rigged against you. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. The difference was Bernie meant it and he would have done something about it. Donald Trump said those things because he knew that was a way to close the deal. Notice that when a woman came along then, who I did vote for in the general, and said, let's just continue with the success of the last 8 years, she then lost the election because millions of people said, what success? I'm drowning here. Those people are still drowning. So when you say appetite, just an appetite to get out of something other than survive, to live not on survival wages, that's what is...
well, the concern is that by you running or third-party candidates running, Cornel West is the Green Party, the No Labels Party hasn't identified anybody yet. The concern is that it's going to take away from Biden. I mean, the major concern is that it can take votes away from Biden, and in the end, Trump is going to get elected. You don't believe that concern is legitimate?
Well, what you just said, and I know you know this, I'm not in the same category as Cornel West. I'm running as a Democrat. I'm not.
But won't that fracture the party a little bit?
Well, in 2016, how many Republicans ran? And the Republican won. This idea that if you have a lot of people running, that somehow that makes it harder. I think quite the opposite. That's what a healthy democracy is.
Getting on the ticket. That's what I want to ask you about, the challenges that you're facing.
Yeah.
Just explain it to us. The challenges of running where you are, getting on the ballot in each state. What has this been like for you in your campaign?
Well, you know, in some ballots, it's simply you pay $1,000. In some ballots, you pay more. In some states, you have to get a certain amount of signatures. This is just math. This is just the technique, the technology.
The reason I ask you is, as you know, some of your staff members have spoken out to Politico. They said that there's concerns in the campaign that they're not focusing enough attention on ballot access requirements. What's your response to that?
So the people who are saying that have never run in have had anything to do with political campaigns before, and to be honest, don't know what they're talking about. That's not what's going on here. It has nothing to do
So what
with
is going on?
Pardon?
What is going on? So when people they're saying that that's not the case?
Well, I ask, no. I mean, ballot access is exactly what I just told you. And so people who are now yelling about ballot access clearly either don't understand what it is to get ballot access. This is not a conversation. Campaigns, this is inside the campaign, how you're going to get the ballot access. And we're doing the same thing every other campaign is.
What do you do with the dismissive comments? And sometimes the derogatory ones. I have one here. Esquire quoted as calling you woo-woo queen of the fields of love. How do you deal with that? Because I know politics is ugly. How do you deal with those dismissive comments?
Well, you know, woo-woo, I would say that that's not written by anyone who's read any of my books. That is written by someone who's really hasn't, you know, God knows there are enough of my lectures on the internet. You know, it has nothing to do with the reality of who I am. A field of love. Would they say that? There's no dismissive comments about Cornel West talking about love or Martin Luther King Jr. talking about love. Hello, what do you think the difference is there?
You tell me.
I'm a woman.
You think that's really what it is?
That's a lot of what's going on. There are a lot of things that people are saying about me and asking about me that they wouldn't ask or say about a man. But listen, this is what's going on a deeper level. There are those who want to peripheralize, get out of the conversation, anyone who doesn't toe the party line.
And by the way, Dan has been criticized for this on the show. He was skewered on social media because he suggests that the reason people might have a hesitation towards Biden, maybe not necessarily the age, it's the unpopular opinion that people have of Kamala Harris, right? And the concern is, and a lot of people, you look at the polls, they believe she's going to jump in if Biden gets elected for a second term. Very unfavorable. He got a lot of heat for even suggesting that he thinks about somebody else to replace her. What do you think? You think her unpopularity is a major concern?
Well, I don't have to speak about her popularity or her unpopularity. I will say this. Of course people are thinking about who the vice president is. You do no matter who's running, and you certainly do if you have an aging president. So it is completely legitimate that people are asking, in considering whether or not to vote for Biden, do I want Kamala Harris to be president? That's simply true.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.